They don't tell you when it happens. No announcement, no warning, no dramatic moment where you decide you're done. You just notice it later, like waking up and realizing a sound you used to hear every day is gone, and you can't remember the last time you heard it. I noticed it on a Wednesday, not the day itself, not the weather, not the traffic, not the usual noise of a city pretending it isn't tired. I noticed it in my body. A message came in that should have hit harder than it did. The kind of message that used to tighten my throat. The kind that used to pull me out of my day and make everything else feel smaller. This time, I read it and nothing moved. I stared at the screen, waiting for the familiar response to arrive. A rush of heat, a pulse of anger, a sharp sting that would make me type too fast or breathe too shallow. But my hands stayed still. My face stayed neutral. And in the silence after the message, I felt something I couldn't name. Not peace, not strength, something closer to reduction. People love calm. They praise it like it's a badge. They call it growth. They call it maturity. They call it not letting things get to you. But there's a version of calm that isn't earned. It's learned, not because you became wiser, but because you became exhausted. I tried to justify it immediately. I told myself I was simply better now, more stable, less reactive. I told myself that I'd finally reached that stage everyone talks about, where you stop caring about the wrong things. I even smiled at the thought, as if I'd achieved something. Then I noticed the second thing. I wasn't choosing what didn't matter. My body was deciding for me. The next day, something else happened. A coworker interrupted me mid-sentence. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't dramatic. Just careless, like they'd already decided my thought wasn't worth finishing. Old me would have felt it immediately. That small flash of humiliation that turns into anger later. That urge to reclaim your voice. New me nodded. I let the sentence die, and I watched myself do it like I was watching someone else. By Friday, I started paying attention, not to the people around me, but to the distance between things and my reactions to them. A friend canceled plans last minute with an excuse that didn't make sense. A family member made a comment that used to cut deep. A stranger bumped into me on the train and didn't apologize. These were small things. They still are. But small things are where patterns live, and my pattern was becoming clear. I wasn't reacting. I was adjusting. The unsettling part wasn't that I felt less. The unsettling part was that no one noticed anything wrong. In fact, people seemed to like me more. They called me easy. They said I was chill. They said I had become so much calmer lately. They didn't ask what it cost. They only enjoyed the convenience. That's when I remembered something from years ago. Something someone once said in a voice that felt too quiet for how true it was. They said, "The world doesn't reward people for feeling deeply. It rewards people for functioning." I didn't understand it then. I understood it now because I was functioning beautifully and I felt reduced. It wasn't just emotions. It was time. The time between stimulus and response had changed. There used to be space there. Space where I could decide who I wanted to be. Space where I could breathe before speaking. Space where I could feel something fully before pushing it away. Now the space was thinner, not gone, just reduced enough that I didn't notice the moment it happened. If you can find the beginning of a change, you can sometimes undo it. You can name it. You can hold it still long enough to examine it. So I looked for the moment I stopped reacting. I expected one event, one heartbreak, one betrayal, one humiliating conversation that snapped something inside me. But the truth was uglier. There wasn't one moment. There were hundreds. It happened in tiny repetitions, in the arguments that never resolved, only paused, in the apologies that came too late, in the promises that were spoken easily and broken casually. in the silence that followed every attempt to explain. Each time I reacted, it changed nothing. Each time I tried to care harder, the outcome stayed the same. And slowly, my nervous system learned a lesson my mind didn't want to admit. Reaction does not guarantee resolution. So I became efficient. I learned to conserve my energy. I learned to keep my voice low. I learned to respond with short sentences that left no room for questions. Okay, sure, it's fine. It doesn't matter. That's the language of a person who has stopped expecting change. I used to think numbness was the absence of feeling. It isn't. Numbness is feeling something and refusing to let it reach the surface. It's your body holding a door shut so consistently that you forget what's behind it. And when you forget what's behind it, you start believing the door was never there. One night, I tested myself, not in a dramatic way. I wasn't trying to break down or force emotion. I just wanted proof that I still had access to myself. I put on a song I used to love, the kind of song that used to unlock memories instantly. I waited for the hit. I waited for the familiar ache. And what I got instead was an uncomfortable neutrality, like my brain had learned to keep everything at the same volume, even the things that used to matter. That's when fear finally arrived. Not the sharp, loud kind, the slow kind, the kind that whispers, "What if this is permanent?" I realized something then, something I didn't want to say out loud. My calm wasn't peace. It was adaptation. And adaptation is not always healthy. Sometimes it's just survival with better posture. A week later, I ran into someone I used to be close to. We hadn't spoken in years. They hugged me and said, "You feel different." I asked what they meant. They laughed like it was a compliment. "You're so steady now." Steady. That word sounded nice until I heard what it really meant. Predictable. Contained. Easy to be around. Like a room with no sharp edges. On the way home, I replayed that conversation. I tried to remember when being easy became the goal, because I remembered a version of myself who would have fought to be understood, even if it made things messy. I remembered someone who would rather be honest than convenient, and I realized I hadn't become better. I had become smaller in ways no one could measure, less expressive, less demanding, less complicated. That's how it happens. Not with a breakdown, with a quiet agreement between you and the world. The world says, "Don't make it hard." And you say, "Fine." The world says, "Keep moving." And you say, "Okay." The world says, "You're too much." And you learn, slowly, to become less. Here's the part most people don't admit. When you stop reacting, life gets easier. Not because life improves, because you stop resisting the weight of it. You stop expecting fairness. You stop expecting closure. You stop expecting people to mean what they say. And that's why it's dangerous, because it feels like relief. If you're listening to this and it feels familiar, I'm not telling you to become reactive again. I'm not telling you to fight every battle or feel everything at maximum volume. I'm telling you to notice the difference between calm and reduction. Calm is when you can feel something and still choose your response. Reduction is when the choice is gone, but you call it maturity because it sounds better. At some point, you stopped reacting, not because you didn't care, because you learned that caring didn't change the outcome. And once your system learns that lesson, it doesn't ask your permission. It just starts saving you by making you smaller. The strangest part is that nobody will accuse you of disappearing. They'll congratulate you. They'll say you're grounded. They'll say you're stronger. They'll say they love this calmer version of you. And you might even believe them, because the world rewards the people who don't ask for too much. But if you listen closely, you can hear the signal underneath it. The quiet truth you didn't choose to learn. You learned it. And now, the only question is whether you keep calling it peace, or whether you finally name it for what it is, quietly.